one of the most educated populations in the country, but that's among adults only. When it comes to funding K-12 education for kids, Colorado is on the other end of the spectrum. Welcome to Politics Unplugged. I'm Blair Miller. Ann Trujillo is off this week. When it comes to funding education, the latest data from Education Week says Colorado spends more than $2,700 less per student than the national average, even less than Mississippi and Alabama, two of the poorest states in the nation. That's one of the reasons why this November, Colorado voters are being asked to approve Proposition CC. Supporters want Colorado voters to approve a plan to amend the state Tabor law and essentially get rid of refunds. Right now, any money collected over the Tabor cap is sent back to taxpayers. Opponents worry there won't be accountability to really prove where the extra money is being spent. They see it as a blank check of taxpayer dollars. But some people see it as a way to potentially secure another $88 million in funding for education. Van Schoales from A+ Colorado is back with us. Now we got a lot to talk about on this issue, Van. You know, supporters want Colorado voters to do this, but right now, you know, the Tabor cap is sort of stopping them. So, you know, let's talk about funding first. You know, it's kind of a combination of several resources.
Yeah, we now know from a lot of research, particularly some research out of Northwestern University, that funding does matter. And it particularly matters when we know that it's being targeted to improve achievement or improve some sort of outcome. So we didn't have a lot of information about this in the past, but we now know that. And we also know that, as you said in the opening, that Colorado is severely underfunded relative to what the capacity of the state is in terms of being able to raise tax dollars.
So in terms of what this exact proposition is, how would that affect school funding here, should it pass?
Sure. Well, it looks like it might raise $88 million that would go into the school finance formula. And there might be some possibility that some of that could be tweaked in terms of being more targeted. If you do the math, we have about 1 million kids and 88 million. So we're looking at in the ballpark of, let's say, $100 extra. You said before the difference between Colorado and the national average is around $2,700. So it will have an impact on closing the gap, but we still have a long ways to go, assuming you think we should fund education at the same levels that most other states do.
And so when we talk about that funding disparity between the states, how does that affect pupils in the state? You know, you see other states that have better funding, have better outcomes for their kids in some situations.
Yeah, in some cases it does have a big impact. I mean, Massachusetts is kind of the poster child for having great results and also fairly high spending levels. There are some examples of places that have pretty good results with not a lot of funding. Actually, Colorado would fall under that category. But I think that it's one of those things where if we are serious about improving achievement, I think it's impossible to do that without additional funding. And I'd also say that it's important to target it in the right ways.
So do you think that the proposition with the targeted money above the spending cap, is that the right sort of thing to raise education spending in the state?
I think that it moves in the, it is a mechanism. I think there are some folks that would say that that it's an additional tax. There are some, but that has less to do with education, just with taxing. And some folks would say, well, we need to do a lot more, and this is only doing this much, and we need to do this much. And so, but I think that it moves the ball down the court, assuming you're on the side that money matters and we need more of it.
And so how would this affect, say, public schools versus charter schools in this state? I know there's, you know, disparities there in how those are funded too.
Right, yeah, so this would help all public schools, public charter schools, public district schools, public innovation schools. So this would raise all boats.
Okay, so when we're talking about these school board races we have coming up, and voters are going to have to decide on these new members, have you seen much in the way of certain school board members campaigning particularly on this issue?
Yeah, so I think that most of the folks that I know in most of the metro districts are very supportive of this because of what I said, that it sort of helps take some pressure off of decisions as it relates to teacher salaries or decisions related to improving funding for particular programs. So I think most folks in the education space are in favor of this. And I think that again, it's going to help, but it's not going to be a game changer, if you will.
So if we're talking about passing this in November, you know, that's some money, but you say it's still not quite enough. What else could the legislature or the state do to, you know, further increase the funding that we've been talking about for years now?
Right. I mean, I think that there's a number of things. I mean, one is this question around equity, around where money should go within the system. I mean, there are some school districts, Commerce City, Adams 14, that gets about 25% less dollars than Denver does, even though they're right next to one another. And so trying to figure out a way to allow for greater equity. And also the state does say that if you're low income, you may need extra money in order to get kids to standards. And so those sorts of questions, how you balance that out. So that's one, sort of how the pie's divided. And then the other question around how do you increase the pie, that's a bigger question, mostly having to do with Tabor and whether or not Tabor has changed. And that's an ongoing debate, obviously.
Right, obviously. It's something we're going to be watching over the next year and something we'll be watching in November here. Van, thanks so much for being with us. Stay with us. We'll be right back.